That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons a podcast shall rise. H.P. Lovecraft, Weird Tales, Ramsey Campbell, Cthulhu, Laird Barron, Silent Hill, Brian Lumley, Dagon. There's something sinister out there in the cosmos, and the tendrils run deep throughout the universe. Only one woman dares to traverse the web. Mary SanGiovanni, who once again is up to cosmic shenanigans.
Hi folks, welcome to Cosmic Shenanigans. This is Mary SanGiovanni, and I am up to shenanigans of cosmic proportions once again. And I am bringing you this week another story, another cosmic horror story, written by a woman. You know, in honor of Women in Horror Month, we're trying to show the world that there is a history of women writing cosmic horror as well. This is a story by Mary Elizabeth Counselman. It is called The Black Stone Statue. It was originally published in Weird Tales in December of 1937. Arkham House subsequently collected it in a collection of hers that it looks like it was published in 1978. Yeah, 1978, and includes a number of stories. It looks like almost all of them were stories that appeared in Weird Tales. She, in her career, she published at least 30 stories in Weird Tales. But here's the thing. She was primarily a writer of American Gothic stories. Despite the fact that a number of them have a sort of a dark twist, she was, according to a source I found, fairly uncomfortable with the heaviness, I guess, of her contemporaries in Weird Tales. That she was uncomfortable, quote, with the gruesome, morbid fiction of H.P. Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith, and those later authors who were influenced by their doom philosophies, end quote. So which I thought was kind of interesting that her, despite this particular story, which has a very, very dark progression, that she still didn't really consider herself a writer of the same types of stories as her contemporaries in Weird Tales, and that she thought that we're too morbid and sort of nihilistic for her to be comfortable with. Now, the story is written as it's in that epistolary format. It's written basically as a suicide note, a slash response to directors of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. They have, he's basically, the narrator is a sculptor, and he has risen to some prominence for a series of statues that he's done in this shiny black stone, this beautiful black stone. And I guess they're asking him to contribute a statue of himself to put among their artistic greats in their museum is just the final straw, because the narrator, the unnamed narrator, believes he's a fraud and relates in this final letter, prior to rectifying the wrongs that he believes that he has committed in the name of art. This letter is going to explain what his experience was and why. Okay. Now, one of the interesting things I think that we see here, as I mentioned, is that the narrator is a sculptor. He's a sculptor of perhaps maybe average talent. I'm not even sure he is even that good. He's basically the starving artist type. And although being a starving artist, I think many of us can confirm, doesn't necessarily have any reflection on your talent, but, more on the marketplace. Still, he doesn't think he's particularly great, but he thought, in the story, he mentions that he thought he had the potential to be great maybe someday. And one of the things in a lot of pre-Lovecraftian cosmic horror stories, at least, that we see, is in lieu of a sort of nebbishy bookworm type guy going for the pursuit of knowledge, we have the artistic types that are in pursuit of perfection in art. The verisimilitude, particularly with sculptors and painters. We see this in Pickman's model. We see this in Chambers' stories related to the King in Yellow. This idea of finding the perfect way to represent life in art, in sculpture, and in painting. And they go to some horrific lengths, much like the people who are pursuing occult knowledge will go to horrific lengths in order to achieve that sort of transcendence in their own work, in their own knowledge base, in their own art. That idea that they have found something or created something bigger than themselves. And there's a sort of cosmic horror element to that, the idea that if life is more or less insignificant, and if pursuits of life, no matter how pleasurable or self-affirming or heroic in some way, no matter what they are, if ultimately all things in a nihilistic viewpoint are ultimately pointless, because life is pointless and the scope of things beyond us is so large that none of those things matter, that maybe one of the only worthwhile pursuits is to create something immortal, to create something that outlives us and outlasts us and transcends the human experience. And there are few areas of pursuit that can do that as well as art. So I think there's a sort of cosmic horror-y aspect that most of life's attempts, the things that you would do in your life, are ultimately insignificant, except maybe either art or knowledge, or both. And there's a sense of that here in this story. There's a sense that this writer, who's basically living in a boarding house in New York, he comes home one day to find a man named Paul Kennicott, who was at one point a famous aviator who was lost in the jungles of Brazil, and who has, for reasons unknown at the time, snuck back into the country, poor, penniless, looking a little haggard, with this black stone box. And the narrator pays for the man to stay there, because really the guy has nothing. And the narrator subsequently discovers that there's a humming coming from this black box, a sort of droning, buzzing, humming sound coming from this black box. And so he threatens to out Paul Kennicott to the police if he doesn't tell him what's going on. So Kennicott launches into this story that when his plane had gone down, he and his co-pilot, McCrae, had crashed into the middle of nowhere in the jungle in Brazil. And that when McCrae, who had suffered more severe injuries, got a fever, Kennicott went looking for water. When he came back, McCrae was gone. His search for McCrae turned up an empty canteen in the middle of what appeared to Kennicott to be a kind of petrified forest or petrified area of the jungle where everything had been somehow transformed into this absolutely indestructible black stone. This sort of shiny, obsidian-like black stone, except it couldn't be fractured, it couldn't be broken, even by its own, even by hitting it with itself. It was more or less indestructible. And in further exploration, Kennicott discovers a statue of McCrae made of this substance. What he comes to find out is that he finds a little star, it's described as, quote, a star-shaped blob of transparent jelly that shimmered and changed color like an opal, end quote. And basically this is an organism, and it moves, it oozes, it moves like a snail, and that this organism produces this constant humming, droning, buzzing sound. At some point, the narrator refers to it as, Kennicott refers to it as an extraterrestrial type organism, but nobody really knows where it came from or what it does. They assume that it's extraterrestrial in some way because of this amazing ability that it whatever it touches and whatever is touching what it touches turns to this black stone instantly from exposure to this organism. Now, three links in a chain. So let's say, for example, if a bug is on a rock and I touch the bug and the rock are both turned to stone, but I am not. So three links down the chain, it no longer appears that this organism has, influence, but everything it comes across, eventually, whatever it touches and whatever's touching that, it can pass this stone-like quality onto those things and petrify them. So, of course, Kennicott finds that this means that there can be countless applications to the world that are practical, that they can build bridges and buildings that are indestructible to explosives or to earthquakes, tsunamis, and that you could basically build it out of sheet materials and then have this entity touch it and have it become an indestructible property, that there's a lot of potential money in this. And of course, our sculptor decides, well, that's not how he wants to apply it. He would like to apply it to his art because it makes, when it touches something, an absolutely perfect rendering of that particular item in stone. So the sculptor does, he takes it a step too far, as narrators and main characters often do in cosmic horror, and he causes Kennicott to touch this thing. He basically forces his hand down on it by holding onto his sleeve, and so Kennicott and Kennicott's clothes turn to stone, but the narrator doesn't. And this is the first statue that he submits to the Museum of Fine Art. And it gets him great renown because it's absolutely perfect rendering of features down to eyelashes. Now, he does this apparently a number of times more. He has a series of soldiers that he also turns to stone this way and submits as statues. And at this point, the guilt is pretty much caught up to him because all he can think about are they stone all the way through? Does it hurt? Can they still think? Can they still feel? Are they trapped in these prisons of stone? Or has it killed them? And he says that he'll basically find out that night because he's on a boat, and his plan is to bounce this thing on the railing of the boat and to touch the entity, and then when he loses the ability to grip something, the entity will fall into the water and be done with. Now, there are problems with this plan, of course. One wonders, what the sphere of influence of this entity is. I mean, what we have here, and this does occasionally come up in cosmic horror, is that it's not the entity itself, which is cosmic in scope, but the entity's ability, the potential scope of its influence, like, say, the blasted heath in The Color Out of Space, or like a virus. A force that is indifferent and relentless and just possibly limitless under the right circumstances. So that's what this, I think the cosmic horror of this story is not the entity, which is, I think, easily argued as an extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional source, but the scope of this influence. I think what struck me as potentially horrific, in addition to the idea of being trapped in this stone prison, we don't know what happens to the inner aspect of the person because these things are unbreakable. So we don't know if they bleed, we don't know if they think, we don't know if they scream in their own heads. That in and of itself, I think, is a horrific concept of being trapped forever potentially in prison till you go mad or die. But, I mean, can you die if all of your, external life forces are indestructible? The other horror, though, the cosmic horror, I think, of this, is that the man's plan is to let this thing fall into the sea in the hope of destroying it. But we've seen that organically and inorganically, this thing is capable of turning anything that touches it and anything that is touching what it touches into stone. The only safeguard would be if you actually use this stone as a containment for the thing. Then it can't penetrate that. But if you drop it into the ocean, there is that possibility then that it can turn the entire ocean and everything in it into stone. And the cosmic scope of that would be absolutely devastating to the planet. So there's that I think that, and it's almost a throwaway line, as in this is how I'm going to solve the problem. But it is, I think, a line that is the most couched in this cosmic horror, this idea that he thinks he's doing right by getting rid of this creature, and he may be damning the whole planet in this plan. So that, I think, is like the true horror of this particular, this cosmic horror story. And I like that there is a really sort of dark turn here by somebody who is admittedly not a fan of the doom philosophies, as she put it, of her contemporaries. That the story really is dooming humanity and approaching cosmic horror in a way that is, admirably right alongside the way Lovecraft or Howard or Clark Ashton Smith might approach the same thing. That it's escape, and that's the other thing I think in a lot of cosmic horror stories, particularly Lovecraftian stories, is this idea that a mistake, an error in judgment made by people, even under the best circumstances, even under their best attempts to right the wrong or improve the situation, that a mistake in judgment has allowed just enough of the cosmic horror to leak into the real world that it can gain a foothold and keep growing exponentially in its horror. You see that a little bit with The Color Out of Space, in the fact that the blasted heath keeps spreading. I think he says like an inch a year in all directions, that it's getting bigger. And I think that you see the potential for that here, in that the narrator's solution is potentially more deadly and dangerous than, just burying this box somewhere. So that's it for this week. That was The Black Stone Statue by Mary Elizabeth Counselman. And I look forward to bringing you more cosmic shenanigans next week. If you are enjoying this podcast, you can listen to past, present, and future episodes all in the same places at cosmicshenanigans.libsyn.com. You can find them pretty much anywhere that that any kind of cosmic anything in a podcast is listened to, but pretty much anywhere that podcasts can be found, you can find Cosmic Shenanigans. If you'd like to advertise on Cosmic Shenanigans, contact Matt Wilderson. And that's it for this week. Bye.
Cosmic Shenanigans. You can listen to this episode and all previous episodes for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play Music, and wherever else podcasts are available. Cosmic Shenanigans is written and produced by Mary SanGiovanni. Our theme music is by Xander Harris. Our engineer is Matt Wilderson. Check out his books on Amazon.com.